Whey protein, collagen protein. You should be having creatine if you're exercising. You should be prioritizing electrolytes if you're someone that's active or sweating a lot. All the other stuff is just marketing bullshit. All right, what is up, everybody? Season 2, episode 2. We're going to talk about essential supplements that everybody should be taking. I was actually talking to a client this morning about it, and she was like, does that mean male, female? Does that mean age specific? And I'm like, everybody should be taking these. Like, these are just essential things that I think from a supplemental perspective that we should be adding to the diet. So when we think about nutrition in general, we need to remember that the priority and the focus should always be trying to get these to come from whole food sources. Like, the more that we can prioritize our diet being the thing that does not require supplements, the better off we are. Now, the context behind that is, there's a lot of conversation, even like I'll give you guys an example, like magnesium, right? This is one of the last little things I'll touch on as far as supplemental requests, or things that I think most people should be taking. But like magnesium has been depleted over years and years and years of agriculture, right? So when you think about this regenerative farming, right, we keep a lot of the nutrients in the soil. But when you think about this typical agricultural kind of style that we've taken for the last 50 years, we take and deplete a lot of the nutrients out. And that's why when you look at farmland and it looks like it's pretty much dying or non-existent, that's what's happening, right? So even with a whole food approach, even with the best diet, there's still going to be missing links for nutrients that your body needs to thrive, right? And at the end of the day, I'm not thinking about these supplements that I'm giving you guys or suggesting for you guys to take as something to just keep you alive. I'm thinking about how do we actually get our body to thrive? So a lot of these, what I talked about today is like me personally, I take a decent amount of supplements, and I felt there's probably like 8 or 9 at the bottom of this list of like stuff that I would say I take more weekly than I do daily. But really it's 4 big ones that I'm going to talk about today. And then everything else I'm going to kind of just touch on, right? So first supplement that I want to talk about, and probably the biggest focus for me and just in general, is whey protein, right? And there's a couple of supplements today that are what I call whole food supplements, meaning that they're not like this synthetic version of something, right? It is the food itself broken down, right? So when you think about whey protein, or casein protein, these are all derived from like a dairy product, right? So these are derived from them. Now, the biggest thing that we want to understand first is a supplement is trying to fill a gap of what you're not getting from a diet, right? We do not want to just supplement for the case of supplementing, right? We want to supplement in the regards to I'm filling something I'm not getting from the diet. Now, something I was just talking to the team about actually a couple weeks ago in a team meeting is when you think about supplements and the psychology of it first, right? And just kind of like a little tangent, in Corey fashion as always, there is this psychological investment that comes from taking something or spending money or doing something, right, to a higher degree, right? And I don't want that to be like, I'm selling snake oil, you should be doing this, and it doesn't work at all, right? When you look at the case of what we call placebo effect, placebo still has a very high degree of improvement in progress in almost everything that we test, right? So what I mean by that is a lot of times I like to tell the team that even for somebody that, let's just imagine that this whey protein or this creatine or this supplement that I'm taking for my pre-workout did absolutely nothing. The thought process behind you changing the perspective of what it's doing for you in return is going to give you improvement, right? And not even just from the psychological change that happens, but also the compliance that happens, right? I will tell you from my experience, like my last men's physique show that I did, this is a long time ago now, but 8 years ago, I remember I was taking all these supplements, right? I mean, for everything from vitamins to performance enhancers to the protein to the pill. I feel like I was just taking so much stuff that my coach was giving me. Just that alone got me excited about training. I was like, hell yeah, I'm juiced up. I got all these things. I'm ready to rock and roll for my workout today. Like, I looked forward to every single workout because I felt like I was putting all the right things in place, right? It's kind of like you getting a bunch of new clothes I got a new suit, I got new shoes, and like I'm excited to show it off to people, right? So there is this natural psychological improvement through the placebo effect, but there also is this psychological advantage of compliance that happens, right? So I don't want that to be the only reason that we think about the reason I should be buying or taking supplements. I just like to put that as a disclaimer that is an additional benefit to the benefits you're going to get from the supplements, right? I will say over the years, I've realized that a lot of stuff is kind of just a waste of money. The supplement market is very saturated, and there's a lot of fairy dust out there. And what I mean by that term is like there's just a lot of stuff that really is not going to do that much for you. So, what are the core things that I should be taking, right? So, like today's conversation with these four big ones these are things I think everyone should be taking. Male, female, 20-year-old, 60-year-old, what are the things we should be adding to that? So, number one, like I said, whey protein. Now, number one thing about whey protein we need to understand is the concentration of leucine, right? Leucine is one of those essential amino acids. You have 9 essential amino acids that we need to be getting through the diet. So when you think about essential amino acids, these are things that can only come from the diet and are essential for function. Now, leucine is one of those things that triggers the mTOR pathway, right? Which is basically, in English, it's the most anabolic amino acid you could take, right? It is the most basically growth-oriented muscle-building amino acid that's available to us. So the concentration of leucine in whey protein is higher than everything else whole foods, right? And I forget how the rating system works on it, but like to give you an idea, like I probably should have wrote that down, but like they called it like a 3 rating for the leucine to concentration, right? Something next of like eggs or beef was at like low 2s, right? 2.2, 2.1. So there's a huge concentration of leucine that we get from whey protein. Second thing, whey protein is extremely bioavailable, way more than what we would think of. Like the problem with vegan protein and why I don't have it down here, even though I will talk on this in a second, is it's less bioavailable. And when we think about bioavailability, it's just a fancy way to say, how much am I actually absorbing from the things that I'm putting in my body? Now, the hardest thing to understand about nutrition and supplements in general is you eat a certain amount and you absorb a certain amount. And there's certain things that are going to inhibit absorption, right? And that could be what I'm talking about here right now, a little bit of the bioavailability of foods. But then there's also things in foods that we need to remember that are anti-nutrients. So when you think about like lectins, you think about phytates, you think about oxalates, right? These are things that we see a lot in the kind of the vegetable family, a little bit of foods. They're actually anti-nutrients, meaning they inhibit the absorption of certain nutrients in the body, right? And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole today, but that's just something to understand that like a lot of times we think just because we're eating it or we're taking in that we're absorbing it, and we're not. So there is a lot of context to how we absorb foods, right? When you think about the state your body's in. If I'm a sympathetic state all the time, on fight or flight, I'm not absorbing those nutrients as well, right? Like digestively, my gut is not getting the blood flow and it's not in the state to be able to digest. If I'm in a parasympathetic state, which is what we call rest and digest, I've actually put my body in a state to be able to rest and digest. So there is a lot of context to that. So that's all like the two big things of like what makes whey protein different than just having regular whole foods, right? So number one, leucine concentration, phenomenal. Number two, the bioavailability. Number three, which I personally think is probably the most important, is convenience. At the end of the day, nutrition is one of those things that we fail when it's not convenient. When it's convenient, it's easy to sustain, right? And at the end of the day, I think the biggest goal of everything behind what I talk about is how do I find ways for this to become part of your lifestyle? How do I find ways for this to be part of, sustainability, right? And convenience is always going to be a part of that conversation. So whey protein, I use a company called Transparent Labs. It's the same company that we sell at the gyms at Functional Lifestyles. Something I've been using probably for, I don't know, last year and a half, 2 years. I like the grass-fed if you can. Like if you can be bougie about it, like finding high quality things is the most important, right, for me. But I will say the degree of difference as far as nutrients or health outcomes between doing the grass-fed, grass-finished, or doing the organic foods or fruits versus non-organic, they're pretty slim, right? At the end of the day, if financially that's something you need to think about, then I wouldn't stress about that, right? I'm just going to share what I use, but at the end of the day, that's something to kind of think about. So when you think about whey, there's concentrate, there's isolate, there's there's cold filtering, there's all these different processes, right? Most of them have kind of gotten away from the concentrate. So when you think about most whey proteins that you would see in the market, that's generally you're going to see a lot of the isolates, right? So for me, 100% grass-fed whey from Transparent Labs. I use the vanilla. I'm personally not someone that really likes just that in a shake with water or milk. I like it to put in a smoothie. I am a huge smoothie fan because at the end of the day, coming back to this convenience conversation, it's not easy for me to cook breakfast in the morning before work due to time, due to laziness, due to motivation. But I'm also just not very hungry, right? So getting something like a shake is a little bit easier for me to digestly get over that kind of that mental hurdle in a sense of like, okay, like this is what I want to do, and this is like for my body, and this are the things that I need. So a smoothie is gonna be easy. So I'll put cup to 2 cups, but I would say probably a cup and a half is on the average of frozen fruit. So like right now I'm doing the frozen, I think it's Wyman. So it's like blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, mangoes. I'll put half an avocado. I'll put a scoop to a scoop and a half of whey protein. And then I'm going to put collagen protein, which I'm going to touch on right here next. And that's my shake. I'll do that with coconut water if I have it, or just regular water. That's what I start with. But I think for me, it's like I naturally try not to have whey protein necessarily every day, but it's not for any bad reasons. I think the biggest reason is understanding that if my goal is at an absolute minimum having zero point 0.7 grams per pound of body weight, up to a gram for most of us, there's context to that answer because like a female naturally carrying a little bit more body fat, as they should, is not going to have as big of a demand on the protein, right? So generally we're trying to keep that more aligned for your lean body mass, right? But a good rule of thumb is that 0.7 to 1 gram, right? So it's like I'm a 200-pound male, just to make math easy. That means that I need to be having anywhere from 140 grams at an absolute minimum up to 200 grams of protein a day. Now, if anybody knows how much protein that is from food, it's a lot, right? Like a pound of meat, for example, gives you on average about 100 grams, right? So it's like if I have a pound, and the reason why I say on average is because like a pound of chicken versus a pound of ribeye, even though they're both a pound, the fat content's going to dictate the amount of protein and the protein source itself, right? But on average, you'll get about 100 grams. So it's like if I was someone that was trying to get 200 grams of protein a day, that's 2 pounds of meat. That's with the understanding that you're having zero protein coming from anything else, which is not true. But just to kind of give you guys, right? Like that is a lot of food, right? So the realistic expectation of someone hitting protein strictly from whole foods, almost majority of not all the time, is very unlikely, right? So I think whey protein is something that does not come with side effects. Most of these things now are filtered in a way where you don't even really have the lactose sensitivity, but that's something you can kind of pay attention to is digestively, how do I feel? But it's a food supplement, right? Like it's a whole food supplement. It's not something that's synthetic or made up. It's something that's derived from dairy. So it's going to be a great source of protein. On average, I would say 24 up to 30 grams of protein is a serving. You do not have to be worried about taking a little bit more. I think if you wanted to be really exact with the timing, if you're replacing it as a meal in a smoothie like I am, in the morning's really fine. If you really wanted to capitalize on the timing of it, I would say probably post-workout would be the most ideal, right? But for most of us, I think like at the end of the day, the timing of these foods or proteins is not something you should be worrying about. But if you wanted to get a little nuancy with it, that would be something to kind of think about. So whey protein is my number one essential thing that I think all humans should definitely have in their shells. You don't need to rely on it 7 days a week. Ideally, I think like for me, I'm not eating a lot in the morning, so I'm probably doing 4, maybe 5 shakes a week. And that's the amount of times that I'll have protein. Second thing is I want to talk about, because since I just mentioned it, is collagen protein. Now, when you think about protein, there's basically this amino acid profile, right? And like I mentioned earlier, we have 9 essential amino acids that need to be coming from diet, right? They need to be coming from your nutrition. Now, the one thing that's been lost with just our generations of eating is we don't really eat nose to tail, right? And what I mean by that is if you were to think about how you were to eat food, and I always like to think about nutrition a little bit more primally, right? And a lot of people, the argument is like, well, we don't live in that state, so why the hell would we need to think about it? And I'm like, well, I agree. Like, I don't need to hunt for my food. But if you think about like how the universe or God or things presented us as food, as far as how we used to eat, we used to only eat things that walked, flown, or swam. And we only ate things that grew from Mother Earth, right? Or like Mother Nature, whatever it's called. So fruits and vegetables and meats, right? Like that's a lot of what majority of our diet should be built around, right? It's a lot of what I preach as far as what ideal nutrition is going to look like. Now, the one thing you need to remember when you think about collagen, right? Number one, collagen has a different amino acid profile. You're going to get a lot more glycine, right? Which is something separately I'll even talk about a little bit on. You're going to get proline and hydroxyproline. These are the 3 that are going to be different in collagen, peptides, and protein. And these are things that you almost don't get any of when you're eating only muscle meat. So when you think about the tendons or ligaments or cartilage or bone broth or bone marrow or all the things when we think about this nose to tail approach, the nose to tail approach balances out your, your amino acid profile, right? And a lot of the argument still in the nutrition space is high protein or high animal meat. When we think about the cancer, we think about the mTOR relationship to it. And a lot of that is from the methionine that's in muscle meat, right? It's supposed to be there. It's nothing to be scared of. But if we're not balancing it out with the other side of it, like things that are going to be inhibitory to methionine, like glycine and things like that we get from collagen peptides, from an optimal health perspective, it's not ideal, right? And a lot of times when we think about like the marketing side of collagen is your hair, your skin, your nails, your gut repair, right? Sleep. One of the things about glycine that's so powerful, right? Like glycine, if you buy glycine by itself, I like to put it in my coffee in the morning, like if I'm doing hot coffee at home. It almost looks like table sugar, right? And it's almost actually a little bit sweet. It's fantastic to take at night too, right? So if you're doing a tea at night or anything at night, putting a little bit of glycine in there, like I forget what the actual dosage is, but I literally do like a little small spoonful when I'm doing it at night. And it's going to help with GABA. It's going to help with cooling down the body temperature. And it's actually going to allow you to get into a more restorative state for sleep. So there's definitely some sleep benefits, and that comes from glycine, which glycine comes from collagen, right? But from a health perspective, we want to have a balance, because the thing we need to understand is most people are not getting that through the diet. So this whole conversation around supplements filling the void of the gap of what you're not getting from your diet, collagen is a huge part of that, right? Second to obviously just protein intake. Now, collagen, because it's not getting the other side of the amino acid profile, like leucine, like I mentioned earlier, it's not going to be something for muscle growth, right? It's going to help with regeneration of your tissue and soft tissue. So your joints, your tendons, your ligaments, your gut cells, your gut lining, your nails, things like that. So, and if you've never taken collagen before, the one thing that I will say is always, like, I feel like it balances out, like after about 3 or 6 months of it that I noticed. You're going to realize, like, holy shit, my nails are growing really, really fast, right? So I think collagen in the diet, having 10 to 20 grams a day, super essential for everyone to have. Is it something you should be taking every day? I don't really think at the end of the day I try to have any quote unquote supplement every day. Like at the end of the day, we don't even necessarily need to have food every day, right? Like fasting is a very powerful thing that I'm not going to talk about today. But like, yeah, I think most 4 or 5 days a week, if you could be putting it into, like, I'll put in my smoothie this morning. If I'm doing hot coffee, it blends well. I use a company called Bubs Naturals. I think the collagen peptides are fantastic. They mix well. It's obviously coming from a good source as far as quality goes. Transparent Labs, I was just mentioning earlier, they just came out with their own. So those two in general, I think, are going to be great things. I want to touch on the vegan protein or vegetarian protein for those that are obviously not eating animal meats or animal sources. My only suggestion I would understand is bioavailability is going to be the thing. Pea protein tends to be the top of the food chain. So if you are looking at a vegan protein, try to make sure that it's coming from a pea protein if you can, right? So those are my two. Next third one, I'm sorry, is going to be creatine. And I'm going to touch on HMB a little bit too, right? Creatine, by far, I would say, I mean, I don't know if you would count whey protein as being a studied supplement, right? Creatine is once again coming from food, right? So to give you guys an example, if I have a pound of red meat, I'm getting 5 grams of creatine. If I have a pound of chicken or fish, I want to say that's roughly around 2 or 3 grams of creatine. For the longest time, when I first started working out, however long ago, 18 years ago, we always looked at creatine as like this muscle building thing, right? Like it's doing something to get me stronger. And it's like, it's going to bloat me with water and I got to do this loading phase in creatine. A lot of that's a little bit of like some bodybuilder old school myth. But creatine just continues to keep pumping out the research. By far the most studied supplement on the market, like hands down. And the cool thing is you're actually starting to see a lot. They're talking about it in relationship to dementia and Alzheimer's and depression, even like all the brain side of it. Because like obviously creatine is something that your brain needs a lot of as well. But we've always looked at it from this just bro bodybuilding kind of mentality of like we do it to build muscle and to get stronger. Now, mechanistically, what's happening is like ATP is the currency and the energy of the cells, right? Meaning like your cells use this to produce energy, right? And like when you think about exercise or running or jumping or the things that you would do in the gym, having creatine helps with the production and basically allowing us to have more ATP to use, right? So that's where you get these big performance gains and these big muscle gains from supplementing with creatine. Why most people should be taking creatine is because 5 grams from a pound of meat, a lot of people are not eating it, right? Or even if I was eating a pound of chicken, I'm still at half the serving of what kind of creatine is. But the beautiful thing about it is on the brain health side of things. The research is showing more on like the higher ends of like closer to 10, sometimes even 20, but closer to like the 10 gram per mark, right? A serving of almost every single creatine supplement. Creatine monohydrate's the only one you really need to have. All the other stuff is just marketing bullshit. 5 grams is a serving size, right? Just to gotta give you guys context, right? So you can get away with doing higher ends of it, right? They even look with people that are like sleep deprived and what it does for energy levels and cognition levels and things like that it improves by doing 5-10 grams a day. So once again, coming back to the moral of the episode today, why would I supplement with creatine? A, it's going to be fantastic for building muscle. It's going to be fantastic for speed and performance and strength and everything that we get in the gym. When you look at it from a brain health perspective, we're seeing a lot of benefits and a lot of research showing up on that side of the table in the conversation of like Alzheimer's, depression, dementia, those type of things. And the last part is really we're not getting enough of it from food because a lot of people are under eating on animal protein. And you don't realize, like, to give you guys an example, if you were to go to a dinner tonight and you were to go get a filet mignon, right, or a New York strip, they're going to give you 6 or 8 ounces. A pound is 16 ounces, right? So that means like you would have to have 2 big steaks a day just to get to the 5 gram mark, right? Which is still probably half your protein intake. Now, coming back to the frequency, how often would you take it? I personally think it's the best thing to do is take it during your workout or right after your workout, right? So what I do is I mix it with some essential amino acids. I put a scoop of protein in there, or creatine, I'm sorry, and I sip on that throughout the workout. I work out for sure 3, but ideally probably 4 times as far as strength training goes. So for me, 3 or 4 times a week, I'm going to have creatine. And I'll go through seasons because if I'm eating a lot, my whole food like approach to eating is kind of like on the money. I don't need to have creatine as much. But for most people, because they're under eating on protein, that's why the collagen, the whey, and the creatine are part of today's conversation. They're going to be essential pieces to your diet, right? And there's something that I highly recommend almost every single person should have if you're training, right? And if you're not training or you're a vegetarian or you're not someone that eats a lot of protein, it's even more important for you to be supplementing with creatine because you're going to get a lot of what you need as far as the muscle building side of it. Because think about it this way, your basal metabolic rate is the amount of calories your body burns every single day at rest, not doing anything, is going to increase with more muscle mass, right? So the priority of training outside of endurance or cardiovascular stuff is to build muscle, is to get stronger. And creatine is going to be one of the most essential things that you could do to expedite that process and actually encourage because it's congruent to what we're actually trying to do inside the gym with strength training and hopefully with your diet, right? HMB, I want to like touch on a little bit because the creatine I take from Transparent Labs, sounds like I'm just plugging all their stuff, which, I am. I don't have a discount code. I just have it at the gym because I like it. But they use HMB, which is hydroxymethylbutyrate. Very fancy word, but it's basically a metabolite of leucine, right? And I think like I was looking this up the other day. Like leucine breaks down, like even when you're having whey protein, like I talked about earlier, I think like 20 to 30% of that gets broken down to HMB, right? It's more beneficial on the anti-catabolic side of things, meaning it's better for helping the breakdown of muscle. It's not necessarily something that's going to help with the production of muscle or building of muscle, but it's going to be something that's going to help with preventing the muscle breakdown, right? The HMB research that I was just looking at the other day, Dave Asprey was talking about this on one of his podcasts, and the benefits actually were like extremely out of balance, and it was from the people that did train. So like meaning if you were untrained or never been in a gym or just getting into the gym, HMB benefits were like through the roof, right? Versus someone that was training. So I think it's less of an essential piece to today's conversation, but there's a lot of research showing that they're synergistic to each other, right? Like it's a great stack to do together. I only just plugged that today because the one that I take is creatine plus HMB, right? So there's a little bit of that you're going to start seeing with supplement companies coming out. Fourth and final one, as far as the main, is electrolytes, right? I think electrolytes is something that, if I were to look at my parents' generation, I think a lot of what we thought with salt in general was kind of demonized. Like fat was bad for you, salt was bad for you. But if you think about hydration in general, this is an interesting thing for you to understand. You can be dehydrated drinking a gallon of tap water every day. Like let that resonate. You can drink a gallon of water a day and be dehydrated still. So understand that the cells have this electrical charge, right? And the only ways to get water or hydration or nutrients or anything in and out of the cell is through this electrical currency, right? So when you think about electrolytes, we're thinking about sodium, we're thinking about potassium, we're thinking about calcium, we're thinking about chloride, we're thinking about calcium, don't know if I mentioned that. Calcium is something I would say out of all those, we probably get the most from dietary sources. So sodium being the priority, the main driver of hydration, potassium, and then magnesium, right? So like if I were to give you, I take LMNT, right? Element like packs. Another thing I have at the gym, I always love the taste of them personally. Some people don't love them. Like my wife, she kind of thinks that there's stevia in there. I don't mind stevia. It doesn't bother me. Some people don't like the aftertaste. There's plenty of other products that you guys can be taking. But even without the product, how do I get that stuff in without even taking a product, right? Or supplementing it? It's like a lot of that comes from just like how we're cooking our food and how we're salting our food. There was one of the coaches. She has a different company. I forget what the name of it is, but it said like this one has 80 trace minerals, and I was like, don't get fooled by marketing. All like if you were to buy any rock salt or electrolyte salt or anything like that, they're all trace minerals inside of that, right? So a lot of them have so much of that in there without doing anything. So it's not like it's something that's additionally added, right? So coming back to this, I actually just screenshotted this. Let's see if I can find it. It was talking about the sodium and just basically the loss that happens, right? So if I were to do yoga right now, I will lose for an hour. This is all going to be an hour. You would lose 200 to 400 milligrams of salt, 52 milligrams of potassium, and 5 to 10 milligrams of magnesium. If I were to go hot yoga, I go to 800 to 1200 milligrams of salt loss or sodium loss in that hour. I go to 150 to 250 potassium, 20 to 40. If I do strength training, so come take a class with us, 400 to 900 milligrams of sodium loss, 100 to 200 milligrams of potassium loss, and 10 to 30 milligrams of magnesium loss. If I were to go do some HIIT training or conditioning, it's going to go 800 to 1500 milligrams. If I do endurance, 900 to 1600, right? If I go in the sauna, 700 to 1500, right? So you lose a lot. And the context behind this is it's depending on the intensity, it's depending on the temperature, it's depending on the amount of sweat. Because a lot of things, to give you guys an example, coffee is a diuretic, meaning every time you drink coffee, it's naturally going to make you pee a little bit more. So you lose electrolytes through just urination. Alcohol is another one that's kind of a sleeper. This is an interesting fact. I want to say it's like 150 to 300 milligrams of sodium loss per drink. I'm sure there's context depending on the type of drink, but I'm a drinker. I have a couple glasses of wine every night at least. So it's like, hey, that means I'm losing, let's say on average, 500 milligrams of salt just in alcohol. Not counting my sauna that I do, not counting my workouts, not counting me just working in a hot gym all day. So when you think about hydration and why it's so important, a lot of even brain fog, right? We need to be hydrated for almost all functions, right? Like potassium, for example, is not necessarily, it's more intracellular, not extracellular like sodium is, but a lot of like the nerve signaling that we have and just contraction of the muscles and things like that. That's why when you hear the old like, oh, I'm cramping, eat a banana, potassium, right? So we need to have a lot of that, right? We need to have a blend of it, but ideally when you look at the priority, like Element is 1,000 milligrams of sodium per pack, it's 200 milligrams of potassium, and it's 80 milligrams of magnesium. So the dominant thing that we should be focusing on is getting more sodium in, right? And the argument can be, if I have a lot of sodium in the diet, do I need to really be supplementing with that? And the answer is maybe not, right? Like I drink a lot of coconut water in the summer. I salt my food a lot. If I'm not really sweating a lot, or I'm not doing a running workout, or I'm not doing a sauna, then yeah, I don't think there's a need to do it. But I do think the electrolytes and hydration is an essential piece of what we're talking about. And I think really the context is depending on activity level. I do put it as an essential piece because not even just from an exercise performance, but also just a cognitive performance, right? Because if you're like, this is one of many reasons, but like I already use a hangover, for example, like you feel dehydrated, you got brain fog, there's all these things that come from it. Like those are just lifestyle pieces. Like we don't want to be operating with brain fog. And if you're dehydrated, not only on like the constipation side of it or the head side of it or the muscle side of it, there's a lot of things that kind of trickle down from it. So adding some type of supplementation on electrolytes for the days that are hot, the days you sauna, the days you go on a run, the days that you do conditioning, I think it's really, really beneficial to adding that to your routine. So those are the 4 big ones. And I want to kind of fly through the last ones. Next one is essential amino acids. Coming back to what I was mentioning earlier, branched chain amino acids, do not buy those supplements. It's a waste of your money. It's not giving you the complete complex of the things that you need to really grow muscle. So essential amino acids would be the thing that I would suggest. I take EAAs, the intra workout from Transparent. It's got a little bit of electrolytes, it's like pretty underdosed on that for what it is. That's what I mix my creatine with. That's something that's great to sip on workouts. I think it's better for untrained individuals. I think it's better for highly trained individuals. I think it's something that's good to kind of sip on throughout your workout because it's basically just the broken down form of what protein is going to break down to. So it allows for this more not anabolic state, but more anti-catabolic, preventing the breakdown of actually the things we're looking at. Next one's magnesium. almost, I think it's like the number is pretty staggering. I want to say it's like 50 to 70% of Americans, or maybe just population in general, are deficient in magnesium. And kind of how I open up the podcast itself, a lot of that comes from just the nutrients being depleted in our fruits and our vegetables, our soil, the whole 9 yards. Magnesium has a bunch of different chelates, right? Like glycinate, all these different things. So I think having a blend of those things is always the best. So I personally take BioOptimizers, and it's called Magnesium Breakthrough. It's going to be really, really beneficial to helping your body kind of down regulate and slow down. It's something that if you're stressed out, you're depleting a lot of magnesium. So taking that is also kind of like a nighttime, bedtime like supplement, I think is extremely beneficial for almost all humans. So that's something I take. To be honest with you, I'm not very good at taking it with anything nighttime, but I think it is something that's like I would suggest. Liver is an interesting one, right? I take desiccated, so basically just dried capsule liver, and I also have another one that has like kidney, heart, like has all these different blends. And I think it comes back to like I would much rather my nutrients come from whole food sources. So adding some type of a supplementation, unless it's coming from a dietary, I don't think it's an everyday thing. But I do think, hey, a few times a week, having some desiccated organs in your diet is going to bring more vitamin A. It's going to bring more, like, for example, liver, vitamin A, B12, copper, CoQ10. Like, there's all these things that a lot of us maybe be missing in the diet that I think might be, beneficial to supplement. But I don't put that on the essential. Adaptogens, ashwagandha, reishi, lion's mane, cordyceps mushrooms. I put lion's mane in my hot coffee or smoothie in the morning. Reishi is a capsule that I'll take at night. These are whole food. These are mushrooms, right? These are roots. Adaptogens are great. This word I will fucking butcher. So astaxanthin. Astaxanthin. It's a carotenoid from algae that a lot of fish basically gives like salmon the pink color or shrimp the pink color. It is coming out a lot in the longevity space and the biohacker space as part of the conversation. It's one of like, basically, it's a super, super powerful antioxidant. I take it only during the summer, and here's why. I'm someone that's kind of a lizard. I love being outside. I love being in the sun. I don't wear a lot of sunscreen, so I'm not the best at that. There's actually a lot of research showing on just UV protection. So from a skin health, wrinkles, those type of things. But also just the antioxidant, benefits that it provides. It's something I take, but I only take during the summer. Taurine, one of those ones that kind of does a little bit of everything. I supplement with that every once in a while. Krill oil, that's something to kind of think about. I think for most of us, depending on how dietary sources, fish oil, krill oil, I think sometimes is a sensitive subject because there is a lot of bullshit out there. So making sure that you're getting it from a quality source. I personally have not been taking it for a while. Glycine, like I mentioned earlier, the main amino acid that we see from collagen peptides. Glycine is almost looks like I mentioned, like a table, looks like sugar. It's a little sweet. Something I would add in tea at night to help with sleep. I think having 10 to 20 grams a day, when you look at the research, like you can't overdose on glycine. So as far as coming back to this longevity conversation, a lot of longevity guys are always talking about glycine. So I think having that as part of the routine, especially if you're not having collagen protein, definitely worth kind of just throwing into some of your drinks in the morning or ideally at night. And then the last one's L-theanine. I think L-theanine is just one of those things that we can take if we are really stressed out, or even like there's a lot of research from people throwing that in their coffee if they're, stressed out or they get the jitters, things like that. So I actually put it's like this small, it's like an eighth of a tablespoon. I'll throw that in my coffee when I make the hot coffee at night. But those are all things. I mean, there's so many supplements to take out there, but I think the main thing is like, what am I missing from my diet from a nutrient level? That's why I like the liver or some of those like kind of organ things. But for me, whey protein, collagen protein have there. You should be having creatine if you're exercising. You should be prioritizing electrolytes if you're someone that's active or sweating a lot. Those are the four that I think would just be essential things for someone that, if you're listening to this, I'm assuming you work out, or you're assuming you're at functional lifestyles to begin with. So these are things that I think would just be essential to have no matter what. So hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you guys next week. Take care.